This is a video on facing on the lathe, and it's the third video that has to do with this particular workpiece. So far we've completed a facing operation, we've completed a roughing operation, and now we'll be finishing the same profile that we roughed. Remember that the facing operation was finished right to Z0, so there's no additional work to be done there. If you didn't catch the first few videos, I recommend checking them out unless you already know what you're doing, in which case we can get right to it. So I'm going to hide those tool paths. We have a nice clean sheet to work with, and I want to pick a finishing operation. I have to do my geometry selection just like I did with the roughing operation. I'm not going to mess with any of this menu. Again, lots of control here. These menus get pretty detailed, but you only need to get into it for more complex operations. This is a pretty simple workpiece after all, and I would like to remind you that you can probably take care of 95% of machine components with about 20% of the knowledge of Mastercam. So let's use our 20%. And we want to select geometry just like we did with roughing, where we're selecting a particular half of this line. And really, I recommend just get in the habit of always picking the first half of the line. I know that's not a very descriptive way of looking at it, but it would be the first half of the line that cutter encounters, or that piece of geometry that the cutter encounters when you're actually in your cutting operation. So this half of the line, not this half. We want the cutter to go this direction. So from here to here is our final bit of geometry to be machined in this operation. We'll hit the check mark. And same as before, we want to keep the same principles in mind. Actually select the tool that you have in your shop. And here we're looking at a left orientation roughing tool. That's no good. Rough orientation, but completely different turret alignment. This would be for something like a vertical lathe, most likely. Let's look for a finishing tool. Let's see, here we have a right finishing tool, 15th thou, tool nose radius, 35-degree insert. This matches something we have in the shop, so I'll pick that right here. Make sure I reassign the tool number according to the turret number or the turret location for that actual tool. It's tool 2 in this case. Now we have to think about the feed rate in inches per rev that we're going to use for our finishing operation. I'm going to something with pretty fine, just to make sure we get a good surface finish. Spindle speed for the tool that I'm used to using, it's effective around 525 cutting speed when you're working with mild steel. And then again, we want to set at max spindle speed of 2000 RPM for safety. Turn the coolant on, looks good. Remember the rule for habit forming sake. Tool change, force it. Even though we don't really need it in this case, it would be in there anyway, because naturally the program is switching from tool 4, the rougher, to tool 2, the finisher. There would have been an M01 inserted anyway, or an M0 or an optional stop with a tool change. But if we force it, we just make sure it's there, and it forms a good habit. And we'll call this the finishing operation. I don't know why, but I have a habit of liking that to be screaming at me. And in here, I do very little. The finish step over is fine. Remember, from the roughing operation, you can see that space between the white line right there and then the gray line above, which indicates the rough stock. I think we had something like 20 thou left there. I could go back and check if you like. We don't really need to change anything in here. It's only going to take one quick pass, but we want to control it using the wear compensation. And it is a good idea, and I might have forgotten to do this in roughing. We can go back and check. I'll change it. Let's go to roll around sharp corners. So we're going to get a nice little radius inserted every time the geometry encounters an intersection and it looks sharp. Does a nice job of automatically deburring. Remember, wear compensation for finishing. Turn the option on to roll around sharp corners, and check mark. Very little work to be done. You can see now that gray profile brings us right in line with the white geometry. And we have a feed line cutting through that corner to indicate that it's been knocked off. Notice it didn't knock this one off because I didn't select this bit of geometry. We had to have a complete intersection in order for that option to work. There's a nice little lead out right here. I'm going to hide that. Let's go back in here and check a few things. I do have my computer compensation type for roughing, and then let's go to roll around sharp corners for roughing as well. Notice now I have to regenerate that I've changed a parameter, and it also forces me to update the finishing operation because it changes according to what was accomplished in the roughing operation. Notice not much to it. Let's take a look at the back plot first. Notice here is the 20 thou to be was left in X, and the 3 thou that was left in Z. I'll go back and ensure those numbers for you. 20 thou in X, 3 thou in Z. And let's backplot that and see that material removed. And it was when the tool engaged this face right here, that's why we don't leave much in Z for roughing, or for finishing rather. Take a quick look in 3D if the computer can handle it. Thing's been struggling today. Facing, right to Z0, our roughing. So let's take note of something here too, and you can learn to trust this operation. These intersection points are exposed because this was finished right to Z0, but you can't see, like that white line right there is the front face of the workpiece as was shown in the geometry right here, but you can't see this line because we left so much extra in X for finishing. So let's go back to that window. So notice here, white line, and then no white line here because there's extra material we left here. And if you're wondering about this line right here, just think of it as low quality graphics. Because there's only 3 thou there, when it zooms out it renders in kind of a difficult fashion, but if you zoom more closely in you can see there's nothing there. So that means this is an incomplete surface. And then when I hit play to show the finishing operation, it will expose the white geometry throughout the workpiece. Struggling, and there we have it. A good looking operation, no crashes, finishing right to the drawn geometry in the other window. Computer's still struggling. Let me exit out of this. View, top, save. It's been a while since I've done that.